The training chamber exploded into chaos as Alger pressed his palm against the quantum resonance field, feeling the cosmic energies respond to something deep within his human biology. Around him, alien students scattered as their carefully controlled power matrices destabilized, their individual focus shattered by the unprecedented wave of harmonic resonance flowing from the human atmospheric specialist. Instructor Zayla's crystalline features darkened with concern as she witnessed what should have been impossible. The Velkari had spent centuries perfecting their ability to manipulate void currents through precise mental discipline. Yet this human from the forgotten deathworld was generating more raw cosmic energy than her most advanced students, and he was doing it instinctively. The Academy's warning systems began their urgent symphony, but Alger couldn't hear them over the strange harmony building in his chest. It felt like something calling to him from the spaces between stars, a frequency that matched the rhythm of his own heartbeat. His companion, Barnaby, stood at the chamber's edge, his debris field navigator instincts screaming warnings about the dangerous energy patterns swirling around his friend. "We need to shut this down," Barnaby's voice cut through the chaos, but Alger was already beyond hearing. The quantum field was responding to something far more fundamental than technique or training. It was responding to the deep pack-bonding psychology that had allowed humans to survive on their violent homeworld for millennia. 3 hours earlier, Alger had been nothing more than a curiosity at Langmore Academy, the first human to be accepted into the galaxy's most prestigious institution for cosmic force manipulation. The ancient academy, carved into the living rock of Astworth Station, had trained the elite of 17 different species for over 2,000 years. Its crystalline spires reached toward the heart of the Beckford system, where the intersection of 3 cosmic void currents created the perfect environment for learning to harness the mysterious energies that flowed between worlds. Zayla had been skeptical when the Academy Council announced they would be accepting the human applications. Her species, the Velkari, had dominated the study of void current manipulation for centuries, their natural mental discipline allowing them to achieve perfect individual focus. The idea that creatures from a class-12 deathworld could master such delicate arts seemed absurd. Yet here she was, standing in the Academy's ancient halls, watching this human move with a grace that seemed to defy his species' reputation for chaotic violence. Alger's atmospheric specialist background had given him an intuitive understanding of pressure differentials and energy flow. But there was something else, a quality in his movements that spoke of deeper harmonies. The morning's theoretical lectures had been standard fare. Zayla had explained the fundamental principles of void current manipulation to her mixed species class, watching as each student absorbed the information according to their species' learning patterns. The Altarian students processed everything through mathematical models. The Nixani approached the concepts through emotional resonance. The Velkari, like herself, relied on pure mental discipline, but the human had done something unexpected. Instead of following any recognizable learning pattern, Alger had begun asking questions about group dynamics. How did the void currents respond when multiple beings worked together? Could the cosmic energies be shared or amplified through cooperation? His questions had made Zayla uncomfortable, though she couldn't articulate why. The traditional approach to void current manipulation emphasized individual mastery, personal discipline, and the careful control of one's own inner energies. The idea of collaborative manipulation was not just unusual, it was considered dangerous. The afternoon's practical session had been designed as a simple exercise. Each student would attune themselves to a basic quantum resonance field, demonstrate their ability to maintain focus under controlled conditions, and show their understanding of energy flow principles. It was introductory work, meant to establish baseline abilities before moving to more advanced techniques. Barnaby had performed adequately, his debris field navigator training giving him excellent spatial awareness and the ability to track multiple energy signatures simultaneously. The other students had followed their species' traditional patterns, each demonstrating competent but unremarkable control. Then it had been Alger's turn. The moment Alger touched the quantum field, Zayla felt something shift in the Academy's ancient stones. The void currents that flowed through Langmore's halls began to resonate in patterns she had never encountered in her centuries of study. The human's energy signature was unlike anything in the Academy's extensive databases. It was complex, layered, and somehow reaching beyond the individual boundaries that defined traditional manipulation techniques. She watched in fascination as the other students began to react. The Alterian mathematical models couldn't account for what they were observing. The Nixani emotional resonance patterns were being overwhelmed by harmonics they didn't understand. Even her own Valkyrie discipline was straining to maintain focus as the human's energy patterns created interference throughout the chamber. But it wasn't random interference. As Zayla analyzed the patterns, she realized that Alger's energy signature was somehow incorporating elements from each of the other students' approaches. His atmospheric specialist background was allowing him to understand the flow dynamics, but something deeper was enabling him to resonate with the cosmic energies in a way that bridged individual boundaries. The Academy's monitoring systems began registering energy levels that shouldn't have been possible for a first-year student. Zayla's crystalline features showed her growing concern as she recognized the implications. If a human could generate this level of void current manipulation without formal training, what would happen when he learned proper techniques? More disturbing still was the way the other students were responding. Their individual energy signatures were beginning to stabilize, not through their own efforts, but through some kind of harmonic resonance with the human's patterns. It was as if Alger's presence was creating a collective field that enhanced everyone's abilities. This was unprecedented. It was also potentially catastrophic. Zayla made the decision to end the exercise, but as she moved to shut down the quantum field, she felt something that made her pause. The human's energy signature was reaching out to her, not aggressively, but with a quality she recognized from her own species' ancient bonding rituals. It was an invitation, a request for connection that spoke to something deep in her Valkyrie psychology. For just a moment, she allowed herself to respond. The connection that formed was unlike anything she had experienced. Through the link, she could feel not just Alger's thoughts, but his deep emotional need for belonging, his instinctive drive to protect those around him, and beneath it all, a capacity for loyalty that burned with the intensity of a star's core. It was beautiful, it was terrifying, and it was completely against Academy protocol. The aftermath of the training session left Zayla with questions that challenged everything she thought she knew about cosmic force manipulation. As she made her way through Langmore's ancient corridors, the Academy's stone walls seemed to whisper with residual energy from the human's unprecedented display. The traditional teachings spoke of individual mastery, of the careful cultivation of personal discipline required to safely channel void currents. But what she had witnessed suggested that humans approached these forces through an entirely different paradigm. Her private chambers overlooked the Academy's central courtyard, where students from across the galaxy practiced their techniques under the light of three suns. The Valkyrie had built these halls to foster individual excellence, each chamber designed to isolate practitioners from external influences that might disrupt their focus. The architecture itself reflected their philosophy, separate spaces for separate minds, each pursuing their own path toward mastery. But as Zayla watched the courtyard, she noticed something that made her breath catch. The human students, both Alger and Barnaby, were not practicing alone. They had somehow drawn other students into an informal group, and their combined exercises were generating energy patterns that flickered at the edges of her perception. Even from this distance, she could sense the harmonic resonance that seemed to amplify each participant's natural abilities. The implications were staggering. If humans could instinctively create collective fields that enhanced cosmic force manipulation, it would revolutionize everything the Academy taught. It would also threaten the power structures that had dominated galactic civilization for millennia. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Zayla's crystalline features shifted to accept the transmission, and Council Chancellor Renth's image materialized in her chambers. The ancient Velkari's expression was troubled, his mental patterns radiating the kind of deep concern that came from centuries of careful planning being disrupted by unexpected variables. Instructor Zayla, his thoughts carried undertones of urgency. We have received disturbing reports about today's practical session. The monitoring systems detected energy fluctuations that exceeded all established parameters. We need to discuss the implications of these developments. The way he emphasized the word told Zayla that the Council was already aware of the humans' unusual abilities. She found herself wondering how long they had been watching and what conclusions they had drawn from their observations. I believe we are witnessing something unprecedented, Chancellor. The human students appear to possess capabilities that challenge our fundamental understanding of void current manipulation. Their approach seems to be based on collective rather than individual mastery. Renth's mental patterns darkened with what might have been fear. Yes, we have been monitoring similar reports from other institutions across the galaxy. It appears that humans possess a form of pack-bonding psychology that allows them to share and amplify cosmic energies in ways that were previously thought impossible. The silence that followed was filled with implications. If the Council had been receiving reports from other institutions, it meant the humans' abilities were not isolated to Langmore Academy. It also meant that the galaxy's established powers were already taking notice of these developments. What are your recommendations, Instructor? Renth's question carried weight that extended far beyond academic protocol. Zayla found herself at a crossroads. The traditional response would be to report the humans' abilities as a potential threat, to recommend restrictions or even expulsion to protect the Academy's established order. But the memory of that brief connection with Alger's energy signature lingered in her thoughts, carrying with it a sense of possibilities that transcended everything she had been taught. I believe we need to understand these abilities before we judge them, Chancellor. The humans may represent an evolution in our understanding of cosmic force manipulation rather than a threat to it. Even as she spoke the words, Zayla wondered if she was making a mistake. The humans' energy patterns had affected her more profoundly than she cared to admit, and she wasn't certain if her judgment was still clear. But something in her Velkari instincts told her that the traditional approach, isolation and control, would not be sufficient to handle what they were facing. The communication ended with Renth's promise to consider her recommendations, but Zayla could sense the undercurrents of political maneuvering that would follow. The Academy Council would not be the only ones interested in the humans' abilities. Across the galaxy, powers that had maintained stability for centuries would be reassessing their strategies in light of these new developments. As the three suns set over Astworth Station, Zayla made a decision that would change the course of her life. Instead of maintaining professional distance from her human students, she would seek to understand them. The connection she had felt with Alger suggested possibilities that went far beyond traditional instructor-student relationships. And she found herself curious about the emotional depths that seemed to drive human pack-bonding behavior. It was a dangerous path, but as she looked out at the courtyard where humans and aliens practiced together under the dying light, she realized that the old ways were already changing. The question was whether that change would lead to greater understanding or to conflict that could tear the galaxy apart. The following days brought a series of increasingly complex challenges as Zayla attempted to design training exercises that could accommodate the humans' unique abilities without triggering the Academy's safety protocols. Traditional void current manipulation relied on individual students maintaining precise control over their energy signatures. But the humans seemed to instinctively create collective fields that enhanced everyone's capabilities, while simultaneously making their power levels unpredictable. Her morning found her in the Academy's ancient archives, searching through centuries of accumulated knowledge for any reference to collective manipulation techniques. The Velkari had been meticulous record keepers, documenting every variation in training methods, every species' unique approaches to cosmic force manipulation, and every theoretical framework that might explain the underlying principles. But as she delved deeper into the archives, Zayla began to uncover disturbing gaps in the historical record. References to certain species' abilities had been redacted or removed entirely. Theoretical frameworks that might have explained collective manipulation had been classified beyond her access level. Most troubling of all, she found fragments of ancient texts that spoke of species whose pack-bonding psychology had been considered dangerous enough to warrant systematic suppression. The implications were clear. The humans were not the first species to possess these abilities. They were simply the first to reach the Academy's halls since those earlier civilizations had been eliminated or contained. Her research was interrupted by an urgent message from the training department. The humans had requested permission to conduct a group exercise that would involve all the Academy's first-year students, claiming they had developed a technique that could enhance everyone's learning progress. The request was unprecedented. No student had ever proposed modifications to the Academy's established curriculum. Zayla made her way to the training chambers with a growing sense of unease. The political implications of the humans' abilities were becoming clear. But she was beginning to understand that the immediate danger might come from within the Academy itself. The Council's reaction to her reports had been carefully measured, but she could sense undercurrents of planning that extended far beyond academic concerns. She found Alger and Barnaby in the preparation chambers, their energy signatures radiating the kind of focused determination that spoke of deep purpose. The atmospheric specialist was reviewing technical specifications for the Academy's quantum field generators, while the debris field navigator was mapping the optimal positioning for their proposed group exercise. Instructor Zayla, Alger's greeting carried undertones of respect mixed with something that might have been hope. "We believe we have developed an approach that could revolutionize how cosmic force manipulation is taught. The traditional emphasis on individual mastery creates artificial limitations that prevent students from reaching their full potential." Barnaby nodded, his spatial awareness skills allowing him to track the energy patterns that surrounded them. "Our initial tests suggest that collective manipulation techniques can increase power levels by factors of 10 or more, while simultaneously improving each participant's individual control and understanding." As they explained their proposed exercise, Zayla felt her understanding of the humans' abilities deepen. They weren't simply creating random collective fields. They were developing systematic approaches to shared manipulation that could potentially be taught to other species. The implications were staggering, but so were the risks. Their technique required participants to lower their individual mental barriers and allow their energy signatures to merge temporarily into a collective field. For most species, this would be psychologically impossible. The Velkari emphasis on individual discipline made such vulnerability unthinkable. The Altarian mathematical models couldn't account for the chaos that would result from shared consciousness. Even the emotionally resonant Nixani maintained clear boundaries between individual and collective experience. But the humans' pack-bonding psychology made such merging not just possible, but natural. They had evolved on a world where survival depended on collective action, where individual strength was less important than group coordination. Their instincts pushed them toward connection rather than isolation, toward shared responsibility rather than individual achievement. The exercise they proposed would test whether other species could learn to overcome their psychological barriers and participate in collective manipulation. If successful, it would demonstrate that the humans' abilities were not unique biological traits, but teachable skills that could transform galactic civilization. If it failed, it could result in psychological damage to the participants, catastrophic energy releases that could destroy the Academy, or political consequences that could spark conflicts across the galaxy. Zayla found herself facing a decision that would define not just her career, but the future of cosmic force manipulation throughout known space. The safe choice would be to deny the request, to maintain the Academy's established protocols, and to report the humans' abilities to the Council for official evaluation. But as she looked at Alger's energy signature, she felt again that quality of connection that had affected her so profoundly during their first encounter. The human's loyalty, his protective instincts, his deep need for belonging, these were not threats to be contained, but gifts to be understood. "I will approve your request," she heard herself saying, her crystalline features shifting to reflect her determination. But the exercise will be conducted under strict monitoring, with immediate shutdown protocols if any participant shows signs of distress. The human's energy signatures blazed with gratitude and excitement, but Zayla could sense deeper currents of emotion that spoke to the significance of her decision. By agreeing to their proposal, she was not just modifying an academic exercise. She was choosing to trust in a form of connection that challenged everything her species had believed about the nature of cosmic force manipulation. As they began preparations for the exercise, Zayla wondered if she was making the greatest mistake of her life, or taking the first step toward a future that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be truly connected to the cosmic forces that bound all life together. The exercise was scheduled for the Academy's largest training chamber, a vast space carved from the living rock of Astworth Station and reinforced with quantum field generators that could contain energies powerful enough to power entire star systems. As word of the unprecedented group exercise spread through the Academy, students from every species requested permission to observe. The chamber's viewing galleries filled with curious observers, their energy signatures creating a complex web of anticipation and concern. Zayla had spent the night reviewing every safety protocol, every emergency procedure, and every theoretical framework that might explain what they were about to attempt. The Academy's monitoring systems had been configured to track individual energy patterns, collective field dynamics, and any signs of psychological distress that might indicate the exercise was causing harm to the participants. But as she watched the students file into the chamber, she realized that no amount of preparation could fully account for what they were about to witness. The humans' pack-bonding psychology was about to be tested on a scale that had never been attempted in the Academy's 2,000-year history. The participants included representatives from 6 different species, each bringing their own approach to cosmic force manipulation. The Altarians had volunteered their most mathematically gifted students, curious to see if their analytical models could adapt to collective patterns. The Nixani had sent their most emotionally sensitive practitioners, hoping to understand how pack bonding might enhance their natural resonance abilities. Even the traditionally solitary Velkari had provided participants, though Zayla suspected their motivation was more about gathering intelligence than genuine cooperation. Alger took his position at the center of the formation, his atmospheric specialist training allowing him to sense the energy flows that surrounded the group. Barnaby moved to the perimeter, his debris field navigator skills providing the spatial awareness needed to coordinate the complex positioning that would be required for the exercise. As the quantum field generators came online, Zayla felt the familiar harmonics of controlled cosmic energy begin to fill the chamber. But almost immediately, she noticed something different. The field patterns were responding to the human's presence in ways that the Academy's systems had never been designed to handle. The exercise began with basic energy sharing, each participant opening their individual barriers, enough to allow their energy signatures to touch and merge. For the non-human students, this represented a fundamental challenge to their species' psychological frameworks. The Velkari participants struggled with the loss of individual control. The Altarians found their mathematical models overwhelmed by the chaotic variables introduced by shared consciousness. But the humans moved through the process with instinctive ease, their pack-bonding psychology allowing them to maintain individual identity while participating in collective experience. More importantly, their energy signatures seemed to provide stabilizing influences that helped the other participants overcome their psychological barriers. As the exercise progressed, Zayla watched energy levels climb far beyond anything she had ever observed in the Academy's chambers. The collective field that the group was creating was not just the sum of individual contributions. It was something qualitatively different, a resonance pattern that seemed to tap into cosmic energies at a fundamental level. The breakthrough came when one of the Nixani participants, struggling with the emotional intensity of the shared experience, was on the verge of psychological collapse. Instead of maintaining the traditional response of individual discipline, Alger's energy signature reached out to provide support. The connection that formed was not just between two individuals, but between the human's pack-bonding instincts and the Nixani's emotional resonance patterns. The result was a cascade of enhanced abilities that swept through the entire group. Each participant's individual strengths were amplified by the collective field, while their weaknesses were supported by the complementary abilities of their companions. The Altarians' mathematical precision became available to the emotionally driven Nixani. The Velkari's disciplined focus was enhanced by the human's protective instincts. The debris field navigator's spatial awareness was shared among all participants, but it was more than just enhanced abilities. Zayla could sense that the participants were experiencing a form of connection that transcended anything in the Academy's teachings. They were not just sharing energy, they were sharing consciousness, understanding, and the deep emotional bonds that came from truly knowing another being's inner nature. The monitoring systems began registering energy levels that approached theoretical maximums. The quantum field generators strained to contain forces that had never been channeled through the Academy's chambers. In the viewing galleries, observers watched in fascination and growing alarm as the exercise pushed far beyond anything in their experience. Then, just as Zayla was preparing to activate the emergency shutdown protocols, something unexpected happened. The collective field began to stabilize, its chaotic energies settling into patterns that were complex but controlled. The participants' individual energy signatures remained distinct while still participating in the larger harmony. The exercise was succeeding beyond all theoretical predictions, but as Zayla watched the humans coordinate the group's activities, she realized that what they were witnessing was not just a successful training exercise. It was a demonstration of capabilities that could reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. The humans' pack-bonding psychology was not just allowing them to enhance their own abilities, but to teach other species to transcend their individual limitations and work together in ways that had never been possible. The political implications were staggering. If these techniques could be systematically taught, it would revolutionize everything from military tactics to scientific research to diplomatic relations. It would also threaten the established orders that had maintained stability for centuries, by ensuring that each species remained limited by their individual psychological frameworks. As the exercise concluded and the participants began to separate their energy signatures, Zayla felt a moment of profound clarity. The humans were not just students learning to manipulate cosmic forces. They were catalysts for a transformation that would either unite the galaxy's species in unprecedented cooperation or spark conflicts that could destroy civilizations. The choice of which outcome would prevail was about to be taken out of her hands. In the viewing galleries, she could see observers whose energy signatures radiated the kind of focused determination that spoke of immediate action. The Academy's council would be receiving reports within hours. Political factions across the galaxy would be mobilizing their resources to either harness or contain the humans' abilities. But as she looked at Alger's energy signature, still radiating the protective instincts and deep loyalty that had enabled the exercise's success, Zayla made a decision that would define the rest of her life. Instead of waiting for the Council's official response, she would act on her own understanding of what the humans represented. The galaxy was about to change. The question was whether that change would be guided by wisdom and understanding, or by fear and the desire to maintain power at any cost. The hours following the exercise brought a series of urgent communications that confirmed Zayla's worst fears. The Council had indeed received reports from multiple observers, and the political machinery of the galaxy was already beginning to respond to the implications of what they had witnessed. Emergency sessions were being convened in the Galactic Senate. Military advisors were being consulted about the strategic implications of the humans' abilities. Trade Federation representatives were calculating the economic disruptions that could result from such fundamental changes to established orders. But the most immediate concern was the Academy itself. Chancellor Renth's communication carried undertones of barely controlled panic as he detailed the Council's preliminary conclusions. The humans' abilities were to be classified as potentially dangerous to galactic stability. All human students were to be isolated pending further evaluation. The training techniques they had developed were to be suppressed, and all records of their methods confiscated. Most troubling of all, there were references to historical precedents for dealing with species whose pack-bonding psychology had been deemed incompatible with galactic civilization. The implication was clear. The humans might face the same fate as those earlier civilizations that had been eliminated or contained. Zayla found herself in her private chambers, staring out at the Academy's courtyard, where just hours earlier she had watched species from across the galaxy working together in unprecedented harmony. The memory of that collective field, of the connections that had formed between beings who had never imagined such unity was possible, burned in her thoughts with painful intensity. A soft chime announced an incoming visitor. Zayla's crystalline features shifted to accept the presence, and she found herself facing Alger, his energy signature radiating the kind of controlled urgency that spoke of deep understanding of the situation they faced. Instructor Zayla, his greeting carried undertones of respect mixed with something that might have been gratitude. "I wanted to thank you for believing in us, for giving us the chance to show what we could accomplish together." The simplicity of his words concealed depths of meaning that went far beyond the academic exercise. Through their shared connection during the group manipulation, Zayla had gained insight into the human's inner nature that transcended anything she had learned from formal study. She understood now that his pack-bonding psychology was not just a survival mechanism, but a profound expression of his species' capacity for connection and loyalty. "The Council has made their decision," she replied, her mental patterns reflecting the conflict between her institutional loyalty and her growing understanding of what the humans represented. "You and your companion are to be isolated pending evaluation of your abilities. The techniques you have developed are to be suppressed." Alger's energy signature showed no surprise at her words, but she could sense deeper currents of emotion that spoke to his understanding of the implications. He had known that their success would be seen as a threat by those who benefited from the current system. He had also known that the choice to demonstrate their abilities would put not just himself, but his entire species at risk. "We knew this might happen," he said quietly, his atmospheric specialist instincts allowing him to sense the pressure changes that accompanied her emotional state. "But we also knew that hiding our abilities would not make them disappear. The galaxy needs to understand that cooperation is possible, that the barriers between species can be overcome without destroying individual identity." The conviction in his voice stirred something in Zayla's Valkyrie psychology that she had never experienced before. The traditional emphasis on individual discipline had always made her species resistant to the kind of deep connections that the humans seemed to form so naturally. But her brief participation in their collective field had shown her possibilities that transcended everything she had believed about the nature of consciousness and connection. "What will you do?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "We will do what we have always done," Alger replied, his energy signature blazing with determination. "We will protect those we care about, and we will find a way to survive. But we will not hide what we are, and we will not abandon those who have chosen to trust us." The reference to trust made Zayla aware of the weight of her own choices. By approving the group exercise, by allowing herself to participate in the humans' collective field, she had crossed lines that could not be uncrossed. The Council would not look favorably on her decisions, and her future at the Academy was now uncertain. But as she looked at Alger's energy signature, she realized that her feelings had evolved far beyond professional concern for a promising student. The connection they had shared had revealed depths of loyalty and protective instinct that called to something fundamental in her own nature. The human's pack-bonding psychology was not just a fascinating academic phenomenon. It was a way of being that offered possibilities for connection that she had never imagined. "The political situation may be beyond our control," she said carefully, her crystalline features shifting to reflect her growing resolve. "But the knowledge of what we accomplish together cannot be suppressed. Other species will remember what they experienced in that collective field. The techniques you developed will survive even if the Academy tries to bury them." Alger's energy signature showed gratitude mixed with something deeper, a recognition of the risks she was taking by supporting their cause. In the complex web of galactic politics, choosing to stand with the humans could mean the end of her career, her status, and potentially her freedom. But as she watched the human's protective instincts extend to include her in his concerns, Zayla understood that some choices transcended personal consequences. The connection they had shared had shown her a way of being that was more fulfilling than anything she had found in her centuries of individual achievement. The human's pack-bonding psychology offered not just enhanced abilities, but enhanced meaning, the deep satisfaction that came from being part of something larger than oneself. The galaxy was about to face a choice between fear and understanding, between the safety of established orders and the possibilities of unprecedented cooperation. The outcome would determine not just the fate of the humans, but the future of every species that had witnessed what they could accomplish together. As the three sons of the Beckford system began their nightly dance across the Academy's ancient stones, Zayla made the decision that would define the rest of her life. She would not abandon the humans to face their fate alone. Whatever the personal consequences, she would stand with them against the forces that sought to suppress their abilities and maintain the barriers that kept the galaxy's species isolated from each other. The pack-bonding psychology that had enabled humans to survive on their violent homeworld was about to be tested on a galactic scale. The question was whether their capacity for loyalty and connection would be enough to overcome the fear and resistance of civilizations that had built their entire existence around the premise that individual achievement was superior to collective cooperation. The events that followed moved with the inexorable momentum of cosmic forces aligning. Chancellor Renth's official directive arrived at dawn, carrying the weight of not just the Academy Council, but the broader galactic establishment that had been mobilized to respond to the human threat. Alger and Barnaby were to be transferred to a secure facility where their abilities could be studied and contained. The other students who had participated in the group exercise were to undergo psychological evaluation to determine if their exposure to human pack bonding techniques had caused permanent damage to their individual discipline. But as Zayla prepared to comply with the orders, she discovered that the humans' influence had already spread far beyond what the council had anticipated. The participants in the group exercise were not suffering from psychological damage. They were experiencing enhanced abilities that persisted even after the collective field had been dissolved. The connection they had formed through the humans' pack bonding techniques was creating permanent changes in their approach to cosmic force manipulation. More significantly, word of the exercise had spread through the Academy's informal networks. Students from across the galaxy were requesting permission to attempt similar techniques. The humans' demonstration had not just proved that collective manipulation was possible. It had shown that the barriers between species were not as insurmountable as had been believed for centuries. The political implications were expanding beyond the Academy's walls. Trade Federation representatives were reporting that species who had witnessed the humans' abilities were beginning to question the established frameworks that had maintained economic and political balances for millennia. Military advisors were expressing concern about the strategic implications of enhanced cooperation between species that had previously been limited by their individual psychological frameworks. As Zayla made her way to the chamber where the humans were being held, she found herself accompanied by an unexpected procession. The students who had participated in the group exercise were following her, their energy signatures still carrying traces of the collective field that had connected them. Their presence was not a formal protest, but something deeper, a recognition that their connection to the humans transcended academic relationships. The chamber itself was a study in contradiction. The Academy's most advanced containment fields surrounded two beings whose greatest threat was their capacity for connection and loyalty. The quantum barriers that held them were designed to prevent the kind of cosmic force manipulation that could destabilize entire star systems. But they were being used to isolate individuals whose primary ability was to help others overcome their psychological limitations. Alger's energy signature showed no sign of distress at his confinement, but Zayla could sense the deeper currents of emotion that spoke to his concern for those he cared about. The atmospheric specialist's protective instincts were focused not on his own situation, but on the potential consequences for the other students who had participated in the exercise and for the future of human-alien cooperation. Barnaby's debris field navigator skills had been analyzing the containment system since their arrival, but his attention was split between technical assessment and the social dynamics of their situation. The humans' pack-bonding psychology was creating stress responses that had nothing to do with their physical confinement. and everything to do with their separation from the connections they had formed. Instructor Zayla, Alger's greeting carried undertones of concern for her well-being rather than his own circumstances. Your energy signature shows stress patterns that suggest you are facing consequences for your support of our activities. We never intended for our abilities to put you at risk. The selflessness of his response confirmed what Zayla had already understood about the human's fundamental nature. Their pack-bonding psychology was not just a survival mechanism. It was a moral framework that prioritized the well-being of their community over their individual interests. The threat they represented to established orders was not their power, but their capacity to inspire similar priorities in other species. "The consequences of my choices are my responsibility," she replied, her crystalline features shifting to reflect her growing resolve. "But I have come to understand that some choices transcend personal consequences. What we accomplish together represents possibilities that cannot be suppressed by fear or political expedience." As she spoke, Zayla became aware of the energy signatures of the other students who had followed her. Their presence was creating a collective field that was resonating with the human's pack-bonding psychology, even through the containment barriers. The connections that had been formed during the group exercise were not just temporary phenomena. They were permanent changes in how these beings related to each other and to the cosmic forces that surrounded them. The sight of multiple species standing together in support of the humans was unprecedented in the Academy's history. It was also a demonstration of exactly what the Galactic establishment feared most: the possibility that the human's pack-bonding psychology could inspire loyalty and cooperation that transcended the individual limitations that had maintained existing power structures. Chancellor Renth's arrival was announced by the sharp harmonics of official authority, but his energy signature carried undertones of concern that suggested his own understanding of the situation was more complex than his public position indicated. The ancient Velkari had witnessed the rise and fall of multiple civilizations, and his perspective on the human's abilities was informed by historical precedents that went far beyond academic concerns. "This demonstration of support is both touching and irrelevant," he announced, his mental patterns carrying the weight of institutional authority. "The human's abilities have been classified as potentially dangerous to galactic stability. They will be transferred to a secure facility where their techniques can be studied and contained. The other students will undergo psychological evaluation to determine if their exposure to human pack-bonding methods has caused permanent damage." But as Renth spoke, Zayla noticed something that made her breath catch. His energy signature was showing traces of the same resonance patterns that had characterized the successful group exercise. The Chancellor himself had been affected by his observation of the human's abilities, and his official opposition was being challenged by his own growing understanding of what they represented. The realization that even the Academy's leadership was not immune to the human's influence added a new dimension to the political situation. If the pack-bonding psychology could inspire connection and cooperation even among those who were determined to resist it, then the established orders faced a threat that could not be contained by traditional means. As the confrontation continued, Zayla felt the weight of history pressing down on them. The decisions being made in this chamber would determine not just the fate of 2 human students, but the future of every species that had witnessed what they could accomplish together. The galaxy was at a crossroads, and the path forward would be determined by whether fear or understanding would prevail in the face of unprecedented possibilities for cooperation and connection. The pack-bonding psychology that had enabled humans to survive on their violent homeworld was about to be tested against the combined resistance of civilizations that had built their entire existence around the premise that individual achievement was superior to collective cooperation. The outcome would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be connected to the cosmic forces that bound all life together. The standoff in the containment chamber crystallized into a moment that would define the future of galactic civilization. Chancellor Renth's authority was being challenged not by formal rebellion, but by the simple presence of beings who had experienced a form of connection that transcended the individual limitations that had shaped their species for millennia. The humans' pack-bonding psychology was not just inspiring loyalty, it was revealing possibilities that made the established orders seem artificially constrained. But as the tension reached its peak, the chamber's monitoring systems began detecting energy fluctuations that suggested something far more significant was occurring. The collective field that had formed around the group of supporting students was beginning to resonate with cosmic forces at a level that approached what they had achieved during the formal exercise. The humans' influence was creating spontaneous manifestations of enhanced abilities that were occurring despite the containment barriers. Zayla felt her understanding of the situation shift as she recognized the implications. The humans' pack-bonding psychology was not just a technique that could be taught and controlled. It was a fundamental aspect of how consciousness could relate to the cosmic forces that permeated the galaxy. Their presence was catalyzing changes that went far beyond academic exercises or political considerations. The breakthrough came when one of the Nixani students, overwhelmed by the emotional intensity of the confrontation, began to lose control of their individual energy signature. Instead of following traditional protocols and isolating the distressed student, the group's collective field instinctively moved to provide support. The response was coordinated by the humans' pack-bonding instincts, but it was implemented by beings from multiple species working together in perfect harmony. The result was a demonstration of enhanced abilities that surpassed anything they had achieved during the formal exercise. The collective field that formed was not just stable, it was self-regulating, automatically adjusting to provide exactly the support each participant needed while maintaining the integrity of the whole. The cosmic forces that flowed through the Academy's chambers seemed to respond to their unity with an eagerness that suggested fundamental compatibility between consciousness and cosmic energy. Chancellor Renth's energy signature showed the conflict between his institutional responsibilities and his growing understanding of what he was witnessing. The traditional framework that had guided his species for centuries was being challenged by evidence that cooperation could achieve what individual discipline had never accomplished. The humans were not just demonstrating enhanced abilities, they were revealing possibilities that called into question the basic assumptions that had shaped galactic civilization. "This changes everything," he said quietly, his mental patterns reflecting the weight of recognition that could not be ignored. The humans' abilities are not just techniques that can be contained or suppressed. They represent a fundamental shift in how consciousness can relate to cosmic forces. The implications extend far beyond the Academy's walls. The admission carried weight that transcended political considerations. If the galaxy's most respected institutions were acknowledging that the humans' pack-bonding psychology represented a genuine evolution in cosmic force manipulation, then the established orders would be forced to adapt or risk being left behind by species that embraced these new possibilities. But acknowledgement of the humans' abilities was only the beginning. The real question was whether the galaxy's existing power structures could adapt to accommodate forms of cooperation that challenged their fundamental assumptions. The humans' pack-bonding psychology was not just about enhanced abilities. It was about enhanced meaning, the deep satisfaction that came from being part of something larger than oneself. As the confrontation resolved into a more complex negotiation, Zayla found herself focusing on the connection she had developed with Alger. The human's energy signature continued to radiate the protective instincts and deep loyalty that had enabled their success. But she could sense that his concerns extended far beyond his own situation. He was worried about the other students who had participated in the exercise, about the future of human-alien cooperation, and about the potential for conflict that could result from the galaxy's resistance to change. The depth of his caring called to something in her Valkyrie psychology that she had never experienced before. Her species' emphasis on individual discipline had always made her resistant to the kind of deep connections that the humans seemed to form so naturally. But her participation in their collective field had shown her possibilities that transcended everything she had believed about the nature of consciousness and connection. The political resolution that emerged from the chamber was a compromise that satisfied no one completely, but offered possibilities that had not existed before. The humans would not be transferred to a secure facility, but they would work with the Academy to develop training programs that could safely teach their techniques to other species. The students who had participated in the exercise would not undergo psychological evaluation, but they would be monitored to ensure that their enhanced abilities did not create instabilities. Most significantly, the Academy would establish a new department dedicated to studying collective manipulation techniques, with Zayla as its first director. The appointment was both recognition of her expertise and acknowledgement that the human's abilities required approaches that transcended traditional academic frameworks. As the participants began to disperse, Zayla felt the weight of responsibility for decisions that would shape the future of galactic civilization. The human's pack-bonding psychology had revealed possibilities that could not be suppressed, but the path forward would require careful navigation of political complexities that extended far beyond the Academy's walls. The galaxy was about to embark on a transformation that would either unite its species in unprecedented cooperation or spark conflicts that could destroy the foundations of civilized society. The outcome would depend on whether the fear of change could be overcome by the promise of connection and enhanced meaning that the humans represented. But as she looked at Alger's energy signature, still radiating the protective instincts and deep loyalty that had enabled their success, Zayla felt a confidence that transcended her concerns about the political challenges ahead. The human's pack-bonding psychology was not just a technique or a biological trait. It was a way of being that offered possibilities for connection and cooperation that could reshape the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be conscious beings, sharing the cosmic forces that bound all life together. The Academy's ancient stones seemed to resonate with the harmonic frequencies of unprecedented cooperation. And in that resonance, Zayla could sense the beginning of a new era in galactic civilization. The humans had come to learn about cosmic force manipulation, but they had ended up teaching the galaxy about the true nature of connection and the enhanced meaning that came from being part of something larger than oneself. The transformation that followed would test every species' capacity for adaptation and growth. But the human's pack-bonding psychology had provided a foundation for cooperation that could overcome even the most entrenched resistance to change. The galaxy's future would be built on the understanding that individual achievement and collective cooperation were not opposing forces, but complementary aspects of consciousness that could achieve together what neither could accomplish alone.